for me, how I receive, my intuition, my instincts, how my body communicates with me. If I were just to like teach that to people, a huge percentage of people would be like, I'm not receiving any information because their body functions differently, like their communication system is different. So it's really about creating maps for people so that they can interpret their own body's wisdom coming through.
What would the world look like if people felt like they mattered? Welcome to the Lead with Love podcast, exploring what it means to lead with love in business and life. I'm your host, Jada Selner, and in this show, I'll share meaningful conversations to help you, the creative, the entrepreneur, the world changer, reach more people, go after your dreams, and serve your community with love. I appreciate you joining me. Now, let's get cozy and start today's episode. If you feel a call to trust your body's wisdom in a deeper way, without allowing your mind to override your intuition, then this episode is for you. We cover a wide range of being wild and whole humans. We talk about how to have courageous conversations, navigating friendships while we untame ourselves. And in today's conversation, I get cozy with my friend, Elizabeth DiAlto. She was on a previous episode, and it's just so fun to highlight the evolution and expansion of our lives as we step into a deeper knowing of who we are in our next chapters of sharing our message, our work. And Elizabeth is known for her raw, honest, grounded approach to self-help and spirituality. She specializes in really helping women embody self-love, healing, wholeness, and liberation. And she's been building upon this body of work for over 12 years. She's really integrated different fields of her own expertise around fitness and self-help and wellness and spirituality and coaching, personal development and healing, just like all the things that I love to geek out on. And the thing that I would say I don't like to geek out on is fitness, but she has such a different approach to how we can be in our bodies and really allowing ourselves to connect in that deeper, more whole, more compassionate way. I'm actually a member inside her Embodied Living Center, which is a part of what she founded, the Institute for Embodied Living. And she's also the host of the Embodied podcast, which has been downloaded over 3 million times. She's also the creator of the Wild Soul movement and the Wild Soul Archetypes quiz, which I recently just took, and I share my results in this conversation. So definitely go over to Untame Yourself /quiz and figure out your own archetype by taking the quiz, answering the questions. It's super quick. It'll take you way less than even 10 minutes to do it. And something that I love about Elizabeth is she's just an explorer of life. Like, she's an avid Latin dancer. She's also a container gardener. Like, she considers herself a novice container gardener. And I've seen her plant game is strong inside her home. I aspire as I look at my succulents, even in my office, I'm like, are they going to survive the winter? I don't know. I just don't have a green thumb yet. #growth mindset. But plants, they work really hard to stay in my life. So that's something I just love about her. It's just her love for plants and being that plant whisperer. And people say, and I have to agree, because we laugh our booties off so often when we're together, like laugh out loud, belly laughs where it hurts and we cry. Like, it's just so phenomenal. But people describe her laugh as a sound bath of sunshine and joy. And I completely agree. And I am so excited for us to get cozy with Elizabeth. Elizabeth.
What's up, girl?
I don't know why I keep talking to you. It's so interesting.
Because we just can you imagine if we did the whole interview like that? How long do you think it would take people to log out?
Right.
Keep listening, because they'd be like, are these two going to continue doing this?
It's so funny because I'm welcoming you back. This is your second time here. You were on, what episode were you on? It was episode 141, which was really the 41st episode because I don't know. I just did the 101 was like my first episode. So it looks like there's more, but it was actually not. So if people want to go back to listen to that conversation just about power, liberation, and love, that's a super juicy, cozy conversation. And I feel like this conversation, we've taken up our friendship a notch too. So that's something I definitely want to talk about with you. It's just about friendships and relationships. And I think the sing talking, so just circling back to why am I sing talking to you? That's a comfort level, right? Cause I'm not a singer. I can do spoken word poetry and then pitch doesn't happen. Harmonizing, none of that happens.
Oh, no.
So
that's why I sing talk, because in fact, the worse it is, the funnier the sing talking is. You need no pitch. And in fact, you shouldn't have pitch.
Right. And so I just love that, that our level of comfort and friendship is the foundation is around mutual respect around boundaries, but we also laugh a lot. I just feel we're ratchet, but we're also deep and connected and grounded. And there's just a full range of just womanhood that we can show up. And so I don't bring my sing talk voice to many people. So I just wanted to presence
Well, I'm
that.
honored. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And, this conversation, I've asked you this question before of what does leading with love mean to you? And I'm just curious, something that I notice in you. And as I was just connecting to this conversation is evolution, comes up for me, for you of you are ever expanding just your range and who you are in the world and how you show up for yourself and for others and your business. And there's just been so much evolution. So I want to ask you the question of what does leading with love mean to you in this current season in your body, in your heart, in your soul?
I love that. I have to go back and see what I said the first time, because what it is for me right now, which is so relevant, is just showing up as my fullest self and telling the truth, asking other people to tell the truth. And really, I don't know if you're familiar with Adrienne Marie Brown. Have we talked about her?
I don't think so.
I love her body of work. She has a couple of books, Emergent Strategy, Pleasure Activism. I think she has another one. It might be a collaborative book coming out in the next few months. And one of the things that she talks about in, community building and community organizing is decentralizing leadership. And I have no interest in being any kind of tyrant or dictator in my community. I might be the head creative person who holds space, facilitates, creates the experiences and the content and stuff like that. But I always, you mentioned we have a mutual respect of boundaries. I always want my people to feel like they can set a boundary with me, or they can let me know, if something is going on in the communities or in the spaces or anything that's bothering them, and we could just talk it out. I think leading with love is really being available for accountability, repair, conflict resolution, because one of the things that I've noticed over the years is something's always bothering somebody. Because we're all so unique. We're so multifaceted. We're so multidimensional. And especially in a year like 2020, it's come up a lot this year because I feel like people are just extra tender, extra sensitive, and so many people are holding so much more than they usually are. A lot of people, even though, we would all desire to give each other a wider berth in such a challenging year, a lot of us have not had the capacity for it. And I've had some people both in personal relationships and in my work, my clients and customers, partly because, I draw a line in the sand around what is welcome in my spaces and what is not, around politics and things like that. But I've had some people have these responses and reactions to me, even people who've been in my community for a while. And I'm like, have you met me? Why are you talking to me like someone who doesn't care about you, who's not going to be compassionate, who's not going to have room for you to come with whatever you have and be able to have. I freaking created a courageous conversation framework. I'm obviously going to be available for someone else's courageous conversation, you know?
Yeah.
So that's a roundabout way of saying, I think leading with love is about really honoring other people's agency and not needing to be in control, because I have no desire to control anyone. I am very particular about how I hold my spaces, but that's the biggest thing that's up for me right now, that people feel welcome, accepted, that they could bring all of themselves. We do have some standards for communication, but like, that's it. No one should be afraid to be themselves if someone's leading well.
Yeah. And you talked about the courageous conversation framework. Can you let me into that process? Because I think that everybody's having hard, courageous conversations this whole year of just what are, communicating your standards, your needs, your preferences. Is there like a simple overview? And no, courageous conversation is simple. It's complicated because we're human, but would love to just know how you move through that.
Yep. So actually my book, I self-published a book in 2015 called Untame Yourself. This was part of that. And so I don't actually even remember the framework.
Yeah. That's awesome.
What it starts out with though, is some journaling about, what are you afraid to say? Like, what do you need to say? Like, what's the intention of the conversation? What would be the outcome you would want to have? But what are you most afraid to say? Because it's often the things that we're afraid to say that are going to actually free us, bring us closer to people, foster the connection and understanding to move forward, with that person or with the group or whatever. And then, just getting really clear on, what's not working, what's not going well, what do you want to be experiencing instead? And then there's just some prompts for, okay, how do you want to say that? And there's also some consent built into it, like scheduling a conversation with someone, like letting them know like, hey, there's something I'd like to chat with you about, but in the framework, I worded that in a way that it's not like, when someone's like, we need to talk. I always think of a Dave Chappelle skit back in the day. Can I curse on your show or no?
Yeah, totally.
There's a Dave Chappelle. I think it might be even like his first Comedy Central hour, which I think was called Killing Him Softly, from like, I think it was 2001 maybe. And he was saying, like when your partner or someone says to you, like, we need to talk. And in your brain, you're like, fuck. Because like no one typically is like, oh, great. What did you want to talk about? Like,
right.
We tend to think it's going to be bad. So just other ways to kind of word that, to be like, yo, there's something going on. Like there were some things I wanted to check in with you about. Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to share some stuff. When might you be available to chat? So it's not, when people are closer, sometimes you could just like be like, yo, when are you free? But for other people, it makes sense to, give them some space, get some consent. Don't just dump a conversation on them when they might not be receptive for it. So that kind of stuff.
No, when you share all those pieces, and I'll definitely link to your book in the show notes. If you go to jadasellner.com/180, I'll definitely link to the book. But what I love that you've shared in there, one is that I don't hear a lot of, conversation frameworks that talk about consent. Like that's really powerful. And just the other night at dinner, my family and I, we were talking about consent and like storytelling and characters. And Zoe, my daughter, she's 13. She reads a lot, and she was really enjoying this one book because she's like, there's not very many characters that model consent, even just for like making out with someone, of like, oh, I should have asked you before I kissed you. Or, I think that that's an important conversation that I don't hear a lot. And I think that even having consent and having, big, messy, uncomfortable conversations to make sure that both sides have the capacity to receive and really listen. But there's also this fear too, right? Because like, I think we go through this dance, like we wobble in having hard conversations of like, well, if I tell them that something's coming, now they're like doom and gloom, like what you were saying with Dave Chappelle, right? That they're also like building up because they don't know what the conversation is about. Does that make sense? Like, how do you?
Yeah. And this is so, this is a double bind, right? And I'm thinking back, I was seeing someone earlier this year, and when things started to kind of unravel a bit, I did, check in. I used my own framework. I was like, there's a couple things that I wanted to share with you. I'd really like to chat. When would be a good time, when you could, give me your undivided attention? Because he was super busy. He had a little kid. Because that's the other thing. Like, if you're going to be having a conversation where something's really important, the undivided attention piece is beyond important because we're so distracted, right? So part of it is the consent. It's the respect for the other person, not wanting to catch anyone off guard, which will affect the outcome of the conversation. But part of it is also honoring yourself, that you're literally asking, like, when could we sit down to have a conversation about like some stuff that really matters to me, where we can be really present so we can actually have a good conversation. And I remember he was like really stressed about it. And I was like, it's not like nothing's bad. I just, there's some stuff I just want to check in with you about. But, so many people have past experiences that are informing how they engage with conflict or perceived conflict. So it's like, we want to respect other people by not like dropping a bomb on them out of nowhere. We want to respect ourselves by asking for what we need in terms of like presence and focus in a conversation. But ultimately, like, there's no perfect way to do that because everyone has such a different relationship. Like, how someone responds to that might not even have anything to do with you. Like, any given day, if they're like tender or sensitive or worried about other things, it might just get filed under the category of other stuff to worry about, because like that's the momentum of their day or the week or the month or whatever. So, we could try our best. It's not going to be perfect, but I think the effort matters energetically, regardless of how, pragmatically it unfolds.
Yeah. I love that effort matches, because that's the work that it's like we need to show up and advocate for ourselves and communicate our needs and making powerful requests. But also it's like, if the person on the other side, like, they're worth the effort to have that uncomfortable, courageous conversation, and also being able to sit in the mess and discomfort of like things not being clean and tidy. Like, this has been really a growth edge for me around wanting like harmony and peace and like everyone to be happy. And then I'm just building up resentment inside and like my needs aren't being communicated or my opinions. And so, I think it's just a level of growth and safety, and people also need to learn their own triggers and trauma that's informing how they're showing up in conversations and conflict, like you said.
That's the thing. And, one of the other things I realized is that people also need to build their resiliency. They need to build their capacity for conflict resolution and for having these conversations. So if someone's like a person who completely avoids conflict, it's going to be hard, like the first couple or the first several times. And so even to be communicating like, hey, like, I know this isn't your favorite thing. Like, I know this didn't go so well last time, but like, what you just said is such a big point. If I'm even making the effort, it's because I care.
Yeah.
And it's also because I believe in you and I believe in us, like the relationship, and it's worth it, If I didn't care, I just wouldn't.
Right.
I would just be like, all right, cool. Like, whatever.
Ignore, block.
Smell you later. Don't care. Yeah, ignore, block, ghost, see ya. Like, I wouldn't bother if I didn't care.
Yeah.
So many things I've had, even over the years, you and I talk about this all the time, doing work to, look at anti-racism, unconscious biases and things like this. I am fortunate in my life to have some really great, not even people who necessarily do that work professionally, although I do have some friends who do it, but just some people of various races and ethnicities. But I especially think about my Black friends who will ping me and be like, yo, girl, that post you made, I see the intention. I know what you meant. That's not how it comes through. Like, can I help you make that better? And I'm like, yes, please. Like, literally, there's like 4 people I could think of over the years who have done that for me and changed everything. And even that's a form. And they've also told me, they're like, listen, I don't do this with everybody, but I know you'll listen and I know you will fix it. And I know you actually care. So, I mean, that context applies to some of the most sensitive things, to some of the most innocuous things,
I think also being able to receive and listen. Like there's so much safety that we're like craving or clinging to have those uncomfortable conversations, but also being open to change and like, oh, I see my intent, but then I also see the impact and they're not lining up, and being able to like own up and like own our side of the street and clean up the mess in whatever way. Cause I've been called out behind the scenes, which I think also that's something to pay attention to as well, is also just like safe space, like you said, right? To have the conversation, the time and the space matters as well. I think it can be really helpful for people to like, okay, it's not being called out, I don't know, like publicly. And like, I think about like when kids feel shamed in public and it's like, oh, we just needed to like pull them to the side and have a more intimate conversation so that their fight or flight isn't also, and they're not able to actually receive and listen.
Yeah. And listen, there's a line here between tone policing, when someone's like angry and being like, well, you should have pulled me aside or like whatever. But there's also just when we have the capacity, right? Like when our nervous systems aren't flooded in one way or another, to really be wise about what is the optimal chance? Like, what can I do to make sure I've done everything on my part that this is going to be received the way it's intended, right? Because we know the difference between intent and impact, but there are certainly things that we could do to affect the impact.
Yeah.
In terms of effective communication. And again, like we're not always operating at like full capacity, full compassion, full consideration for all these things. Like a lot of what we're talking about are ideal circumstances, but we certainly can practice and do our best.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I also want to celebrate that we're neighbors now.
Neighbors, you're like 20 minutes.
We're Bay Area neighbors, and it just makes me so excited. We've done hikes and walks and just hanging out in our sweats and helping you unpack. So there's been a lot of like new foundation. I don't know what the right word would be, but you have like a new home physically, and you also have a new digital home on your website. You've stepped in, this is the evolution that I'm talking about for you, that you're always expanding and evolving and expressing yourself. So you have untameyourself.com, your new digital home, and I'll tell you my results in a minute.
So there's a quiz.
Yes,
right?
Elizabeth.
The website, but there's a new quiz on the website as well.
Yes, but I just actually want you to take me back to kind of the spark moment when you knew that things needed to shift physically in your physical space as well as in your digital space. Like there's an expansion and evolution happening, but could you take me back to the spark of inspiration of something has to shift and change?
I don't know that I would call it inspiration, but it actually, I have to give so many props to dear friends, former client, current client, Rena Carcio, who runs Genevieve Digital. So Rena has been in the Wild Soul community. I know I have a lot of different names for things, by the way, for anyone listening. So I have a movement practice called Wild Soul Movements. The name of my corporation is Wild Soul Movement, Inc. My book is called Untame Yourself, which, by the way, you can link to that book if you want. It's from 2015. So, and it's self-published. So people be gentle with me. I've lived 17 lifetimes since I published that book. So I had two separate websites for a little while, wildsoulmovement.com and untameyourself.com. And then I decided to create the Institute for Embodied Living. So sometimes people are like, what does this bitch do? But it's all embodiment work. The Institute for Embodied Living is now just like where everything lives. It's this awesome Mighty Networks hub where my courses, my membership, my teacher training, like everything lives there now. But we reclaimed the untameyourself.com website because that's where the podcast lived. So that's where all my SEO was. And that's where, years and years, again, since 2015 of stuff lived. And also, across the board, everything I do, like embodiment work is the core, is the root of it, but it is about helping women untame themselves. So we were like, which name goes on the website? It was like, Untame Yourself really is the one. So part of it was in 2014, when I first launched Wild Soul Movements, I had a beautiful website. I got this custom website. I spent an exorbitant amount of money I had no business spending that early on. I just want to say that. Like, why did anyone stop me? Like, who was going to stop me? And then it was expensive. I couldn't keep it up. And that was that was a big like shame inducing thing for me. So I had to switch to just like a basic ass website with a theme that was just cheap. And we kept some of the branding elements, but it was like, I went from having this gorgeous website to this basic ad. Like, it was gutting. Every time I looked at that other website, it was just like a knife in my stomach. But it was what I could afford, like digital stuff. I know people listening to your show are mostly entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, some of it's just like, we don't know what we don't know. And then we start spending money on things sometimes. And then we're like, damn, but I only considered the initial investment. I didn't consider like the ongoing and all the plugins and the softwares. And like, damn, it's just a lot.
Yeah.
So Rena, who had been a student of mine for many years, and this is what she does. Like, she's incredible at SEO. You and I have talked about her, but also like digital strategy and things like this, especially for people who have a lot of content. And I mean, I had content from 2010.
Wow.
10 years worth of stuff from back when I did fitness, 345 podcast episodes, so much content that was doing nothing for me because I'd never had proper SEO. And she was like, can I please help you with this? She's like, I love you. I love your work so much. It could be reaching so many more people like organically. Like, let me help you get your shit together. And I was like, yes, please, for the love of God. Like, let's do this. So it was painful and like emotionally, like a little embarrassing. Like, but again, it's just like so much stuff. I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
But she helped me. That took like 7 months, maybe more than that. And so that's really what it was. That's why I say I don't know if it was inspiration. It was really someone like kind of grabbing me by the shoulders and being like, hi, let me help you because this could be so much better. And like your work, and also a person who really believes in and has benefited from my work, going, more people need this and let's get your shit together.
Yeah. I love, where we can find those people along our path that really see the magic, the healing, what we bring to the world and can call us out or call us in, call us forward to that next evolution too. And like such a gift, to be able to have someone that has experienced your embodiment work, has gotten, transformation from it. And then it's like, and I have a gift that I can help you bring this work to even more people. And I think that like, that's just really powerful to be able to, just connect with people in that way and have them support your work. And I'm a member inside the Embodied Living Center. Is that right? Is that where I'm hanging out? And I think that this is such important work that you're doing around embodiment. And I would just be curious for you to describe or define what embodied living means to you and how you actually express that through your work, your day, and what you're, calling other women or women who identify as women, how you're calling them forward into being in their bodies.
Yeah. So, one of my taglines forever has been get out of your head and into your body. And when I talk about that, I'm not saying we need to like leave our heads behind. I'm not saying we don't need logic, intelligence, or rational or critical thinking. In fact, like I'm a big advocate of critical thinking. I think so many things we see going on in the world right now are a result of people not critical thinking at all. So that's not what I mean. What I mean is so much of our truest, deepest, most innate wisdom, and not even just like historical memory, but like our soul's wisdom, our intuition, our connection to the divine comes through the body, comes through our senses. I call this learning to speak your body's unique language of the senses. And I say unique because everyone's is a little bit different. Some people might have similarities, but for me, and I did this is something I had to evolve out of. For me, how I receive, my intuition, my instincts, how my body communicates with me. If I were just to like teach that to people, a huge percentage of people would be like, I'm not receiving any information because their body functions differently, like their communication system is different. So it's really about creating maps for people so that they can interpret their own body's wisdom coming through, whether that's like their heart's deepest desires, again, wisdom from their soul on a spiritual level, connection to the divine guidance, whatever it is, how people want to engage at whatever level or depth with that comes through the body. And then the mind can be this like beautiful servant of that. So rather than what most people do, which is live most of their lives, if not all of their lives, with their mind overriding the wisdom of the body, because all the programming and conditioning lives in the mind. Judgment lives in the mind, right? Discernment, truth, yes or no, lives in the body. And so when you can connect with and prioritize the body's wisdom, and then let the mind carry out what the body has informed, there's just a more authentic path, a more genuine, aligned way of living, I have found. And it's so healing, especially for women, because we are just so conditioned to care about what everyone else thinks, people please, think people know better than we do, put our authority and our agency outside of ourselves. So to take that back in and then let the mind, do the critical thinking, be strategic, make choices, but again, that are based on tangible wisdom from the body, not theories, not other people's ideas, not trying to find external validation or be who we think we're supposed to be. It's a more joyful way to live. It's a more grounded. It opens you up for much more authentic connections with people, with yourself. And it really helps people build resiliency. And it really helps with boundaries, because if the body is like, nah, then you're like, okay. And you don't need to explain it. You don't need to justify it, right? You're like, I don't really understand why, but my body is a straight up hell no for this right now. So I can't do it. And that's all you need to know. That takes a lot of like deprogramming and uploading new practices, habits, beliefs, ways of being for people to shift into that. But when they do, there's an ease that's available when you can trust yourself and listen and connect to that. That to me is embodied living. It's a whole like sensual experience, right? And I don't mean sensual in the sexual sense. I just mean because you're like fully alive, like engaged with life, reading the signs and symbols around you. Like I could talk about this all day because it's so, for me, it's just a fuller, more meaningful, more honest, more integrous way to live.
What's a moment for you where your body's wisdom was a clear no or a clear yes, but you couldn't really explain it from your mind, from the intellect, or, express it? It's just, I know that it won't match everyone's signal system, but I'm curious for you, how does that express itself?
One of mine, I'll give you 2 examples. I get a lot of direct knowing. And I'll give you an example. In 2016, I was dating someone. We lived together. We had this trip planned to Japan. A week before that trip, I was meditating in the morning, and I got a very strong knowing that I could not go on that trip. I didn't know why, but I was just like, I can't go on this trip. Luckily, we were able to find someone to take my spot, The week I would have been in Japan, my grandma died. So something in me knew, don't go, because it would have been a nightmare and so expensive, right? To try to get home, it would have taken so much longer. Whereas it was just like, boom, hop on a plane. I'm with my family. So that's one example for me, is the direct. It's just like this knowing of like, oof, I don't know why, but can't do that. But then also one of my other signals is tears of truth. And the first time this ever happened, it was 2012. I remember literally where I was sitting in this coffee shop in New York City. I was reading this book, and just like this one, it was like 3/4 of a page. It wasn't even a whole page of a passage about women getting burned during one of the religious inquisitions in Europe. And I just started sobbing my face off. And I was like, why? This is nuts. But ever since, tears of truth, and you know this, because this involves you. Part of me living here, a couple of years ago when I was up in Oakland and we were meeting for dinner at Cholita Linda, I got out of my car and I started crying. There was like something about this neighborhood that was so resonant for me. And so like, I don't know what this is about, but so that signal for me, the tears of truth, are always just kind of like this, hey, pay attention. Like there's something important for you here. I might not know right away. And then it's funny because I moved into that neighborhood. I didn't even realize until the night you came over for dinner to help that you were like, yo, Cholita Linda is like right around the block. I was like, what? I moved into the neighborhood that made me cry. Damn, I was going to end up here one way or another.
Yes. Oh, I love it. How would someone, kind of unpack their own signals? And I'm sure you probably do this work deeply inside the, embodied living center. But is there a way, for someone who could start to pay attention to their own signals of their body's wisdom?
Yeah, the gateway in that I always tell everyone is the breath. It's just breathing. If you just notice the sensations of your breath, that immediately brings you down out of your head, present into your body, right? Because when you inhale the air, your chest expands, your belly softens and fills up. Like it brings the energy and attention down and in. So you can notice what's going on in your body. You can actually feel your body. That is step one. People want to do all kinds of fancy stuff and sensual movement, which I also teach. But it's like, if you're not breathing, if you're not connected to your breath, if you're not doing like the most basic thing, all that stuff is just going to be performance or, like going through emotion that's not going to yield anything if you don't get the foundational, like being able to like drop in, ground and feel your body.
Yeah.
Listen, there's so many reasons why people would avoid that, so there's so much healing around this.
Yeah. And I think that's, something that I've been paying attention to a lot is just allowing ourselves to be in more trauma-informed spaces.
Yeah.
That really allow our nervous systems, our bodies to soften so that we can actually receive and like fully receive support. Because I can think about many coaching relationships that I've been in or programs I've been a part of and just like, oh, like this was not a trauma-informed space and I wasn't aware of my own trauma, but stuff was happening, And so that's what I love about the work that you do. That is so deep, but you're also so real and funny. So I love that too. Like you're just like a whole human, your friends and clients call you like a Care Bear. And it's like the Care Bear stare of just warmth and love and full expression of joy too. Like I feel like I can really sink into many parts of me when I'm in the same room as you. And it's like a mirror, right? Like what I see in you also exists in me.
Yeah. And that's the whole point, right? Like to create spaces where people can bring and be all of themselves.
Yeah. So on your website now, you have a new quiz that came out on 11/11 called the Wild Soul Archetype Quiz. And something that I love, I did the results and I said that I would share my results with you and I wouldn't tell you before we started recording.
I love that.
But what I love at the beginning of this quiz, right? It says for the best results, be super honest and don't overthink your answers, which, I can be an overthinker. No choice is better, more spiritual or ethical than any other. Select the answer that resonates most for you right now, not what would have resonated most in the past or what you aspire to resonate with most someday. So I just want to dig into this a little bit because when people do quizzes and things, there is this like, oh, this is who I used to be, or this is who I want to be. Like, I just love how you named it and got us to like come into the moment of where we are right now.
Yeah. I mean, cause I love quizzes and personality tests, but the problem with any self-assessment is none of us see ourselves 100% accurately. So the point of that was to try to like increase the accuracy.
Yeah. So I wanted to share my results with you or actually, can you just tell me a little bit about the archetypes and then I'll tell you there's the sacred creatress, right?
There's 6 archetypes.
Yeah.
So most of my work has evolved around and centered around the archetype which is widely known, the wild woman archetype, which has been around forever, but was popularized by Clarissa Pinkola Estes in her book, Women Who Run with the Wolves. And so a lot of people are familiar with the wild woman. Working, like being a wild woman, like really resonating with that archetype, I naturally, my community is mostly people who would resonate with that general archetype. And, I, being that my work is called Wild Soul, I call my people wild soul women. And one of the things over the years that I've just been observing is how people express their wildness differently. And so what I noticed was the three main ways that people express their wild nature. There's like the fierce nature, the loving nature, and the mystical nature. And so from there, I created 6 archetypes. And again, all of this is based on working with thousands of women since 2013 in this context, and just seeing like how different things express through different people and how like different people's pathways to connecting to that part of themselves. So like inspired by the wild woman, but just more like nuanced and intricate, because this is a little bit of a tangent, but one of my pet peeves around anything to do with like women's empowerment, people like women rising, like the divine feminine and stuff like that, is that so many people paint a picture of it that's not relatable. That is actually more exclusive than it is inclusive and inviting. And even on the quiz page, I wrote about this, how I realized femininity was a sore spot for me for a lot of my life. And womanhood is so much different than femininity. Like femininity is like an aspect, but womanhood is like the full experience of being a woman, right? So the 6 archetypes, the fierce natured ones are the sovereign queen and the warrior goddess. The loving natured ones are the erotic priestess and the divine mother. And I have to tell you what's already happening, which I knew would happen, is people are so hung up on the word erotic. They're like, I don't know if that's me. And I'm like, but you need to understand the root of that word before it got co-opted by the porn industry and became over-sexified,
Yeah.
So, and then the mystical natured ones are the medicine woman and the sacred creatress. So I'm sure you will not be shocked that my top archetype is medicine woman.
Yeah. So my top was sacred creatress.
I could have guessed that.
36%. And then 29% is medicine woman.
Love that.
Yeah. What I realized was just like how disconnected I have been from the creatress within me as I've gone into business. I've been an entrepreneur for 12 years now. And I allowed to like dim that creative expression in me. Like it just got quieter and quieter with all of the roles and responsibilities of being a wife and a mother and a boss and just all those different hats. So I've had my own reawakening really this year that I've been calling like my creative cocoon in 2020, really tapping back into that like spoken word poet, like for me to be alive and expressed so that I can help others with that same pathway. But I have been disconnected from that creativity, that expression of my own wildness. And I'm reclaiming it right now for sure.
I love that. And for me, the difference is I have been discovering my medicine woman along the way. Because that is not another one of my taglines is everything you've ever needed has always been inside of you. And that's one of the reasons I really wanted to create the archetypes, because people really, and especially women, are so much more inclined to like project their power onto other people. Like you were saying something earlier about like, this is a mirror. I see that in you. I have it in me. Like people who admire us and respect us and whatever, like I'm always turning people back to their own power, right? Like you wouldn't even be able to see that in me if you didn't have it somewhere. Like there's a reason why you appreciate and admire that. And so the archetypes are a way for people to acknowledge that this is in you, right? That sacred creatress, she might have been on the shelf, right? Or taken a back seat, but she's there. She's always been there. And it's about reclaiming, right? It's not about fixing. It's not about finding. It's like, oh, she's there. Let's unearth, let's uncover,
Yeah.
So for me, that medicine woman, that's always been in there. It just was never, that's not something I grew up with any context for. So for me, the unearthing, the discovery and claiming has been really big. And so similar to you, even creating this quiz and writing all the copy, for the emails are meant to be like an alchemical experience. It's not like a funnel. These emails are transmissions. There's magic in the words. There's energy built in for people to feel and see and discover things and rediscover things, and claim things about themselves. So the quiz launched at the time of recording this, it was yesterday. I cannot tell you how many people said it brought them to tears. And that goes back to like the tears of truth, right?
Yeah.
That recognition of like, damn, I do have this in me. Right? I wouldn't have described myself this way, but as I'm reading it and it's resonating for me, I'm like in tears because something in me is recognizing that this is true. So I'm so excited for that experience, for people to really be able to just own, reclaim, or, discover and cultivate these things that truly are in there. Because we all have all the archetypes, and it's just a matter of, calling upon the one we need for the right scenario when we need her.
Yeah. And do you have any, like, once you know your core wild soul archetype, like, what does Jada do? Like, what do I do with my
read the emails?
Yeah.
There's 6 emails coming your way. Read them.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. And you mentioned your relationship with, did you say femininity or feminine? Like
femininity.
Yeah. I would love for you to just like take me there for a moment, because I think it's so resonant and relatable for so many people to just share a bit about that, because I think it's a beautiful bridge to the work that you're doing of allowing ourselves to untame ourselves and to really own our wild soul archetype.
Yeah. So, because we live in this culture that's all about these like gender roles and binaries, some things are labeled as masculine and some things are labeled as feminine. And for me, I was always direct and tough and straightforward and not really like prissy or dainty, not like traditionally girly growing up. I wanted to play sports. I liked boys' clothes better because underneath my baggy sweatshirts, which is, it's funny, I'm actually wearing a New York Knicks sweatshirt right now that I've had since the 7th grade. My boobs started growing in the 3rd grade. I'm Italian and Puerto Rican. Like I've always been curvy, and I didn't want the attention. In the summer, I couldn't hide it. Like I've been fighting off the male gaze my whole friggin' life, and it's like exhausting. So there were just so many things that I did not find when I was young enjoyable about being a girl or growing into a woman. And so I kind of like shirked it and rejected it. And I found much more comfort in things that were, for boys, or things that were labeled masculine. And then even in my 20s, even as I started out my career, like I find things I'm good at and I excel at them, and a lot of times that type of behavior and communication gets praised in men, and in women, it's like, whoa, slow your roll. So I really just received a lot of feedback throughout my life that I was like too masculine or intimidating. And because our culture doesn't really honor like this full spectrum, this full range of femininity, I just thought I wasn't feminine. And I had some shame around that, right? Like, because if I'm not feminine, I'm masculine. And then like all these other things that go along with that. So it's confusing, it's irritating. And finally, once I started to realize so much more about all the cultural programming and conditioning, the mythical norms, as Audre Lorde calls them, I was like, oh, I am feminine in my own way, in my own expression. And it was archetypes. This is why I love archetypes, because it was actually this book called Awakening Shakti by Sally Kempton. She uses 9 Hindu goddesses of yoga. And when I got to the chapter on the goddess Durga, who is a warrior goddess, she's like divine mother, but a warrior goddess. I was like, oh, snap. She has 8 arms. She's dynamic. She rides a lion or a tiger, depending on where you're getting your Durga stories from. And I was like, oh, if this is an expression to femininity, I've always been feminine. I just didn't know. I didn't know that was an option. And so that helped me accept myself. That's why I was like, to me, it always has resonated so much more to talk about the experience of being a woman rather than everything about like the feminine,
Yeah.
And I have gotten into that I did talk about that kind of stuff for a little while, but I never found it as expansive or as enlivening. One of the lines on the quiz page is like, as many women as there are on the planet is how many expressions there are of womanhood. It's not just like the three, maiden, mother, whore, that culture likes to go, this is it. This is what we accept. It's infinite.
Yeah, I really relate with that. I actually grew up being more of a tomboy and climbing trees, and people would say, "Oh, you do feminine leadership," and I'm like, like for me, I'm such a like integrated. Like there's pieces and parts that we are using, the yin and the yang. Like it's all like we all source from all of it. Like it's not binary. Like, really, and I think that's where we can get really stuck. We get stuck. And that's why for me, really reconnecting to my creativity, which is like my spiritual path. Like I know that's where I get like energy and connect to source and to God and life and people is through creative expression and where I get downloads from. And so really reclaiming that is such a huge like gift for me to come back to that and allow her to be seen more. Something that I wanted to was to also just talking about, we don't have to go too deep into this, but just around like friendships and boundaries and clarities of like curating the people that we want in our world and like what we're looking for. I feel like you've made a really big, I don't know, like claiming like, here's the type of friends I want to be in relationship with. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. When you do work like I do in the world that is mostly oriented around like healing, growth, and development, people, you might find yourself with friends who really should be clients. I've certainly had that happen, or people are just attracted to the energy, and over the course of the last several years have just had to be a bit, I'm going to use the word ruthless about, but is this reciprocal? God, like the word reciprocity has helped me so much because this isn't like quid pro quo, tit for tat. We're not like keeping tabs on, what's the exchange, but it's to have people around me where like the exchange always feels even, like everything comes out in the wash. It never actually feels lopsided. That's what reciprocity is. I don't need to measure, like I don't even have room to get resentful because we have each other's backs. And one of the things that I've noticed a huge quality in that, going back to what we were talking about earlier, a bit around courageous conversations, conflict resolution, accountability, and things like that, is emotional maturity.
Yeah.
A lot of people just have not developed that, which is fine. Like it took me a really long time. I'm not perfect now, but where I am is a place that a lot of people are not. And I cannot have people super close to me who aren't, because, if I have an issue, I need to be able to say, yo, that wasn't cool, or that hurt my feelings, or yo, what's going on with that? And not have someone like shut down, gaslight me, project all their shit all over me. Like, no, I dealt with that with my family for so many years. I'm like, I'm spent on that. And if people can't do that, then honestly, they should be a client, or they should be working with a therapist, or I would prefer someone handle that. And, or we could just not be close. We could be acquaintances.
Yeah.
And that's just like, that's discernment, right? Because when I look at what I want out of my friendships, I want them to be super nourishing and juicy and fun and like collaborative and creative, and we support each other and complementary too, right? Like we fill in each other's blanks, and this is what community is about. Like someone's really bad at this thing, but someone else is really good at it. So let's help each other out, rather than me beating myself up like, damn, I suck at this. I can call someone and be like, yo, I need your help.
Yeah. I think
that's what relationships are about.
Yeah. I think there's such like having that diversity within friendships too, of like what you're saying, like filling in the gaps or the holes. And I love the conversation around reciprocity, because I think you and I are very similar. We're both 6'2s on the human design. Are you a manifesting generator?
Yes.
Same. So we're both the same across the board. And the way that we show up in friendships is really like deep and big, and we track and we hold. And I think it's very challenging for a lot of people to match that type of energy of friendship presence, because we already do that for our clients. So imagine if you're like in your inner circle, it's like that love is just so big and so deep. And sometimes it's hard for other people to match it. And then we can feel like, we're giving so much and not being replenished in that way. It's a very unique thing. I think not everyone experiences friendships or shows up the way that we probably do.
Yeah. And it's a capacity thing for some folks too, right? Depending on all these variables, like some people just don't have the capacity to show up for us the way that we will show up for them if they're close. That's something that I've realized over the last few years, especially. Some people just don't have the capacity because of life circumstances or because of literally emotional resiliency or things like that. It's okay. Like, I'm not judging it, but I cannot be in close relationship with it. Yeah. And then one of the other big determinants, you and I have talked about this as well, is, everything I do is to contribute to collective healing and liberation. And so if people in my life, especially the white people, are not doing anti-racism work, if they're not engaged in social justice work, if they're not unlearning and unpacking their unconscious biases and all these things, I also can't be super close to that either. Yeah. Because that's such a value of mine, that holding space for someone to not be evolving in that way, I have no room for that.
Yeah. What would be your recommendation for someone if they were like in community, in relationship with you or in your world, they haven't done the work, but like, where would you point them towards to get started?
I really love Adrienne Maree Brown's emergent strategy. I interviewed her on my podcast at the end of last year. It was just phenomenal. I mean, I have a handful of podcast conversations that would really are great starters for folks. Dr. T. Williams, Desiree Adaway, J. Love Calderon, Adrienne Maree Brown, Shivani Hawkins, like so many great conversations. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but I personally I learn better through conversation and listening to people's lived experiences. So even like some memoirs, Trevor Noah's, what the hell is it called? Born a Crime, W. Kamau Bell's, like the awkward thoughts of W. Kamau Bell, just, learning more about people's lived experiences and just helping that like to expand your perspective, and then actually getting into the work and stuff like that is great. And to just understand, because that's the other thing. I can't let it slide if people are so like mired in their privilege or mired in their white supremacy. And that's not my work, right? I'm well informed around it and I've done a lot of my own work, but that's not my work to be educating around that. And so I need people to have a foundation of awareness and consciousness of that in my close relationships.
I don't feel like a lot of people are sharing from that perspective of understanding, seeking to understand people's lived experiences and listening to conversations. For me, that just feels like, I don't know, a huge light bulb of getting into the world, of starting to awaken to that work. If someone's, far off the spectrum and hasn't done it, I will definitely link to the conversations that you mentioned for people to really jump in and listen and seek to understand.
Cool. Yeah. And that's, I know we're probably coming up on our time, but that's one of the things that I realized. I was like, this actually only just hit me this year. It was like such a big deal. I'm like, oh, a lot of these people just don't have Black friends or friends who are like people of color. They have no exposure. So it's like, I'm not mad at you, but damn, like you need some exposure. Cause that wasn't, I've always had such a diverse group of friends and been part of diverse communities, and half my own family is Puerto Rican. And like I grew up in New York where everyone, this is one of the things I love about Oakland, like all the people live in the same place, not nearly as segregated as a lot of other places are. So it just literally, this was my own unconscious bias, was that people don't have anyone in their life who's Black or brown.
Yeah, it's wild. And I think also for you and I being multiracial, there's nuance to that as well. And that's been like that's my own next journey of unpacking, being Black, Chinese, white, and like reclaiming all those pieces and parts. It's part of the like, I'm not hiding, I'm healing. For me, the work that I've been doing, the deep inner work before processing all of that out into the world. I think we really have to give ourselves the space to heal those parts of ourselves.
Totally. And by the way, let me just put a little asterisk on what I said. I'm not suggesting anyone white listening to this go out and just try to like gather up some Black and brown friends. Like it has to be genuine. It has to be authentic. It can't just be like, you're Black, I need some friends. Like, no,
totally.
not what I mean.
It's true. And that happens like in the world, tokenization. I experience it all the time of being that
you
one.
help us check our box.
Yes. That one representation if I'm doing the work.
I know.
And it's not real. It's not true. Yeah. So really connecting to it from a genuine place.
Desiree Adaway says, I do transformational. I don't do transactional.
Mm-hmm.
That's another great determinant in the relationships. Does it feel like a transaction, or are we like being in relationship with each other is transformational?
Yeah. Well, I'm thankful to have a transformational relationship with you.
Same.
Is there anything else we haven't covered that you would love to share? I know we move through the range of conversation and
no, it's so great. And I'm so excited about the quiz. Everyone go take the quiz. untameyourself.com/quiz. It's so fun.
It's so fun. I'm excited to get my emails so I can do my own work and practices. And I'll talk to you in Voxer or see you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your heart and attention and listening to Lead with Love. You can always get the links and resources mentioned in each episode over at leadwithlovepodcast.com so that you can build a sustainable business and live a creative life on your terms. If this message, Leading with Love, resonates with you and you want to take a stand for remembering that there are humans with beating hearts behind the numbers, I would love for you to subscribe so you never miss an episode and leave an honest review. It would mean the world to me, and it also helps more people spread more love in the world, which we really, really need. I also love hearing from you. So as you're listening, take a screenshot, share your favorite takeaway, and tag me on Instagram and Facebook at Jada Selner. I really appreciate you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.